What is up, DS3 TV? We are back for another video. This one is history summarized by overly sarcastic productions, and this is gonna be a pretty good video. And yeah, let's get into it. And yeah, it should be pretty good. We always love overly sarcastic productions, and happy to see that have some videos of theirs to watch when as I'm getting back into the groove of things. Sorry, it took another like 3 days, well 3 or 4 days to like put out this video. Yeah, so let's get into it. Don't really have that much to say. Oh yeah, also before I get started, you can recommend me videos in the comment section down below and I will react to them. I know I'm behind on actually getting onto some of yours, but they'll be coming out within the week, and yeah, let's keep this train going, and yeah, let's get into it and play.
Nothing stirs the imagination like an honest-to-goodness mystery. There's just something enthralling about the unknown that ranges from the exciting to the abominably eldritch and incomprehensibly terrifying. Now, our old pals the classical Greeks were no stranger to figuring stuff out, what with all their spiffy philosophy, but there were some things that even they...
If you know anything about me, you know I love learning about Greek culture more so than Roman culture, because I feel like I learned a lot about Roman culture. So yeah, I love learning about Greek culture a lot more, because to me it's way more interesting, honestly.
We got a little stumped by. Where did our myths come from? Who came before us? Why does that island look like an impact crater? Should we be scared? Well, all these tempting plot threads are wrapped up in the murky history of a pre-Greek civilization called the Minoans. I should specify, not called that by themselves, or even by the Greeks, because this society was so obscure that we only discovered it in 1900. More than just a stepping stone on the road to Greece making it big, the Minoans are a fascinating part of Bronze Age history because they're so darn weird. So, to trace the origins of civilization in the Aegean Sea, let's do some history. It might not come as a surprise to hear that Greece and boats have a long history together, but it turns out that seafaring in Greece is even older than civilization in Greece, as excavations from the Frankthi caves on the mainland turned up obsidian ferried over from volcanoes on the islands as far back as the Mesolithic era. And those handy-dandy boats helped them make an early transition from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, as the process involved combining copper, found in the island of Delos, with tin, found in the northeast Aegean coast. A route that is unfortunately a little too damp for a walking tour. Between that sweet boat access enabling a thriving fishing community and a local agriculture precision optimized for grapes and olives, the Cycladic Islands were looking pretty idyllic for early civilization.
I mean, honestly, it looks like if you think about like a good place for civilization, like just to start out, honestly, these islands seem kind of nice. Like, because you got to think about it, if you have good fishing, that's you're good on food. As long as there's clean drinking water around, you're pretty much golden. For the most part, you worry about infrastructure after, get food and water. But yeah, like, it looks pretty good.
I mean, heck, bright sunny islands with seafood, olive oil, and wine, Bronze Age suddenly not sounding too bad. The Aegean Sea will continue being a solid 10 for the next 5,000 years, but after a millennium of bronze making, the cultural center of gravity shifted south to the island of Crete. We can see this quite clearly in the archaeological record.
Why is it spelled so differently? Because it's supposed, okay, yeah, so I guess they maybe mess with the spelling, because all my life as a kid, because I grew up in a city called Crete, and that's where I went to high school and stuff like that. It's called Crete. So I'm like, why was it spelled with a C and not a K? Maybe it's just the P. Maybe it's just this, like at this time it was. But I don't know. I was wondering, like, is that like that looks so weird? Because I'm like, oh, I guess maybe it's spelled with a K. I don't know. I always thought it was spelled with a C, but maybe I have some Greek viewers that could tell me anything, because I don't know.
Because the Cretans had a distinct hobby of building massive palaces. Out of the half-dozen spread across the island, the largest and most famous of these is Knossos, home of the legendary King Minos, hence the name Minoan.
That is a freaking dope uh, yeah, that's a freaking dope statue. Like, that is a statue that you would make to assert dominance, you
It
know?
was first excavated in the 1900s by Sir Arthur Evans, who stumbled onto some unusually ancient-looking pottery, got curious, bought up a bunch of land, grabbed a shovel, and got to work. Within 5 years, he and his team uncovered a sprawling building complex made of smooth quarried stone with such amenities as skylights, running water, buried sewer lines, and gorgeous frescoes. Clearly no slouch on the aesthetics, but
Evans spent the next 20 years recreating the palace, so some artworks are substantially less authentic than others. That's still really. Oh my gosh, that looks nice. Yeah, that looks nice. Like, honestly, I like it.
most impressive was the pure scale of the place. The large central courtyard was surrounded by hundreds of rooms for all manner of different purposes, going beyond the typical administrative offices and private residences to include religious spaces, extensive warehouses, artisan workshops, and something approximating a marketplace. Those last three might seem a bit out of place in a royal abode, no matter how ginormous, but they imply a unique structure to the Minoan economy. If the palaces could stock a kingdom's worth of supplies ranging from local Cretan produce kept fresh in cold underground ceramics all the way to overseas luxury items, it's likely these compounds served as mass redistribution hubs, taking in everything and doling it back out as needed. Imagine a farmer bringing in jars of olive oil and exchanging it for fish, some wine, and a new cup made by an artisan in the palace. Call me old-fashioned, but I kinda think they nailed it on this one. It's a system that would require immense organization by the governing bureaucracy, but we have extensive tables of what look like storage records, so when it works, it works. Coordination on this monumental of a scale was new to Europe, but it looks as though it took inspiration from the palaces of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. And that's not all they took from the Near East, as the Minoans were stocked with gold, ivory, lapis lazuli, and scarab designs. So even for all the Minoan fanciness at home, they were still fundamentally a maritime culture. And the rest of the Aegean was very well aware of this, as they would have come into frequent and perhaps unwilling contact with their neighbors from Crete. Even without detailed written records, a broad Minoan influence is evident in the mountains of their pottery and goldwork found on the Greek mainland and all the way over to Anatolia. Much of that was spread through trade, but in the Cyclades it was far more direct, like on the miraculously well-preserved island of Theta, which was home to either an indigenous culture that really dug the Minoan vibe, or an outright Minoan colony. This seafaring supremacy approximates something Athens would become famous for 1,000 years down the line: maritime empire. Thucydides says as much when he cites King Minos as the first to have built a great navy, and this makes one key detail of the palaces make a lot more sense. They don't have any walls. The mainland cities of the time had fortifications so thick they were said to be built by giants, but Crete had a 100-mile moat with boats for days, and that was all they needed. That also implies the Minoans weren't a threat to each other and probably worked as one big team. Now, although we can cobble together a decent understanding of macro-scale Minoan civilization from context clues, the details just leave us confused, because there's an incredible volume of art and pottery, sculpture, and beautiful frescoes, but ask 3 historians what on earth it might mean and you'll get 5 uncertain answers, with at least one historian crying. The prevalence of realistic-ish human figures carrying libations and processing clearly has something to do with religion, but beyond that, I don't know. There's also a reverence for the natural world, with particular emphasis on bulls, as stylized horns show up all over the roof of the palace, and one fresco depicts a gymnast leaping over a charging bull. Because, sure, parkour.
That's such a fire, like, painting. Like, it just looks. It looks like something the Minoans would have done. Like, it just does. It looks like a great depiction of them, honestly.
Is cool and all, but wake me up when the jungle gym starts fighting back. It's metal as hell, but it still doesn't tell us anything without other context. The Minoans did have written languages, but since we don't know how to read either of them, they're stuck as a silent culture, artfully expressing something that we can't figure out. The prevalence of ornately dressed women in Cretan art might
I always feel like, I kind of don't know if I should stop it here, but we're just going to keep talking. I always feel like that's not completely... It's something I don't really like. I'm just going to...
just a more egalitarian or even matriarchal social order than we're used to seeing in classical Greece, as women take active roles in sacrifice and processions and are sometimes surrounded by male attendants. There's...
Okay. Just didn't want to leave on, like, a picture of the booba. But... yeah, I don't understand, like I feel like, yeah, like, if you can't understand a language, okay, you just couldn't understand a language, but I feel like we shouldn't, like, say that they just had no, like, because sometimes I do hear, like, from some historians, that, like, that just didn't have a language then, like if they couldn't understand it. And I've always never understood that, right? Like they had a language, it's just that you just couldn't understand the language, which is a perfectly fine and reasonable thing to say, but you have to be willing to understand and say that.
There's obviously some reason for this, but was it a religious thing, an outright political matriarchy, or blind chance leaving behind more frescoes of women than men? We have absolutely zero idea. Now, coincidentally, we're not alone in our confusion because the classical Greeks also had no clue what the Minoans were up to. In fact, without modern archaeology, their only indication that there was anything happening on Crete at all in the Bronze Age was from the myth of King Minos and the Minotaur. Red's given the full rundown before, but the salient details are a kingdom with lots of boats.
I think everybody knows it, but yeah, it's a pretty good tale though, honestly, to like hear.
A big ol' labyrinth, and a terrifying bull monster. This fits surprisingly well into the historical reality of a maritime empire that built complex palaces and was obsessed with bulls. But the later Greeks wouldn't have known that because Minoan civilization was long dead and buried by the time Athens started loudly bragging about their hometown hero Theseus slaying the Minotaur. So if the Minoans were so big and tough, why didn't they stick around? The most dramatic theory attributes their decline to the island of Thera, which used to be an oval until 1628 BC when a volcano blew it to bits and sank into the sea, throwing a giant cloud of ash across the southeast Aegean. This does explain why the Minoan site on the island is preserved with positively Pompeian precision, and it left an absolutely gorgeous landscape for tourists to enjoy when they go visit Santorini, but it doesn't explain the Minoan collapse, as it's 2 centuries ahead of schedule. Plato likely drew on the distant memory of this explosion when he dreamed up the story of Atlantis, but it isn't our culprit. So let's go over what we do know about the Minoan chronology and see what we can figure out. The first palaces appeared sometime in the 1900s BC, with sites at Knossos, Phaistos, Zakros, Malia, Galatas, and Kydonia. After an earthquake in about 1700, the palaces were rebuilt with some added structural support, and over the next 2 centuries we see Minoan pottery make its way around the Aegean as outposts spring up from Thera to as far north as Kea. Then, around 1450, there's a break. Most of the palaces are destroyed, with Knossos surviving for another century before it's abandoned. Before 1450, records were kept in a language we call Linear A, which, strictly speaking,
There's also Cretan hieroglyphics that date from a slightly earlier. I'm gonna take off. Wait, why is close? Okay, I don't know why that's but because I was wondering, like, why was that up there? But the important one is Linear A. Okay.
is not Greek. It's something else, but we don't know what, and that's why it's still undeciphered. Now, after 1450, the writing is in the same script, but recorded different spoken language. The script is called Linear B, the language is an early form of Greek, and the other place we see this script appear is on the mainland, as written by a people called the Mycenaeans. These guys are relative latecomers, but they're best...
And I do know a little bit about the Mycenaeans, but not a lot.
Known as the Aegeans of the Iliad, who supposedly fought the Trojan War. So what are they doing on Crete? As it happened, they were in a lot of places, as an artistic survey of pottery in the 1300s BC shows the geometric Mycenaean style appearing all over the Minoans' old stomping grounds. So one way or another, it would seem like the Mycenaeans rolled up to Crete in the mid-1400s and either destroyed or deposed the Minoans, only to leave a century later. Without the palaces there to keep society running as it had been for the past several centuries, the entire civilization simply fizzled out and went back to local fishing and subsistence farming. Now, the wildest part is that the Athenians and the other classical Greeks actually knew about this, they just didn't realize it. The thing with the story of Theseus and the Minotaur is that it lets on more than it seems, because when we peer behind all the mythological window dressing, what we're left with is the distant, imprecise memory of the Minoan invasion of Crete. Not quite a bull monster, but tons of bovine art. Not quite an underground labyrinth, but a puzzlingly intricate palace complex. Not quite an annual tribute of 7 Athenian sacrifices, but... well, here's the thing. The Minoan outpost at Kea is within literal line of sight from the Athenian Cape Sunion where King Aegeus threw himself into the sea, and excavations on Crete turned up startling evidence of both human sacrifice and cannibalism. Mycenaean Athens may well have been a tributary to the Minoan maritime empire, and that's a fancy way to say a victim of constant piracy. If Athens has an ancient myth about sailing to Crete and killing a big awful bull monster to liberate themselves from tyranny,
That actually makes a lot of sense. It's literally propaganda then. That means that story will be propaganda because they were paying tribute. So it would be like how we talk about basically the tea, like whole like Tea Party, how we, and everything going on in the American Revolution, and we just always focus on the American side of the revolution. Basically, that type of propaganda, because you just wanted to kind of make yourself look better.
That's not very far off from the actual invasion of Mycenaean Greeks in the mid-1400s, so far more than local Prince Kills Giant Monster version 18b.
Well, I guess it would be more akin to, it would be more akin to how a lot of historians before Native Americans decided to, like Native Americans were able to speak up about what happened. Like how, like everybody just, all the old historians seen Columbus as like this great person that just literally literally could not do anything wrong, and he helped out the Indians and, gave them a Thanksgiving dinner and stuff like that. Like, that's kind of the things that those are the things that are that's what that would have reminded me of, kind of.
The myth of the Minotaur in the Labyrinth is an account of an actual historical event that's been run through half a millennium of mythological telephone. And that, in my professional opinion, is sick as hell. It's some big-time irony that a civilization whose words nobody else can read is best known through a story that nobody thought was real. Modern archaeologists can ponder the Minoans with the aid of incredible discoveries to try and understand what was going on in this stunningly vibrant culture, but the Greeks that came after the Bronze Age, who had infinitely less to go on, were just as captivated by them. The pure mystery of the palace without a voice and the monster in the labyrinth is so damn compelling. It is impressive how many seemingly fundamental aspects of Greek history trace back to the time before it was even Greek history. Terrifying. I love it. Thank you so much for watching. Since I completed my Roman history series, I
Alright. Well, I guess we can hear the rest of what he was going to say.
figured it was appropriate that we go back and properly work our way through the history of Greece, starting at the very beginning. So there is plenty more where this came from. I hope you all enjoy a festive and plague-free holiday season, and I'll see you in the next video.
Okay, so that was it, and yeah, we're gonna probably keep up with the Greek history, because I'm more interested in Greek history than Roman history, since I got to know everything now about Roman history, and I'm still like watching videos of it and stuff like that, but I'm way more interested in Greek history. So yeah, talk to you guys in the next video. Also, subscribe to the channel. Want to get 2,000 subscribers by my birthday next year, and yeah. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. We just got into it. But yeah, doing that, and also got more videos coming out, and what else was I gonna say? Oh, and you can recommend me videos in the comment section down below. And yeah. So talk to you guys in the next video, and peace.